Brought to you by 1AAuto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. This video is part 2 of a 2-part series. We're going to install a Muncie 4-speed transmission into this 66 GTO. Muncie's 4-speeds were used on a lot of GM cars, so this video applies to a lot of different cars: Chevelles, Camaros, 442s, Skylarks, all that good stuff. And just a refresher on the tools you'll need: nothing special unless you're replacing the clutch, and if you're replacing the clutch you will need a clutch disc lineup tool. But other than that, it's mostly wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers, jack and jack stands, and a catch pan. Alright, we'll start out. Here's our extra transmission lying in wait for mating to a new car to go through the gears. Okay, if you were replacing your clutch, you'd want to use a lineup tool like this, and while you're tightening up the clutch pressure plate and pinching the disc between the pressure plate and the flywheel, you want to use this tool and make sure that that clutch disc is lined up correctly so that the transmission can go into it. Okay, we don't have a transmission jack, so we're using 2 people. One person holds the back end of the transmission, put it up into the crossmember, and then the other person looks at the drive or the front end of the transmission, guides it right in. Okay, and I do have this clip muted because I don't really want you hearing all the grunting and breathing that's going on, but it's a little bit difficult. And then you basically just push it in and then move it up and down, a little side to side. Try turning the tail shaft of the transmission, and eventually you find the right spot, and it goes, come on, here it is, and it goes in. Okay, so we've got our transmission up in there. I've started 1 bolt. Now I'm going to start the other 3. Okay, and we'll just speed this up as I start those bolts in there. And if you kind of grab the tail shaft of the transmission and move it up and down a little bit, you'll find that the bolts should go into the bell housing pretty easily. Okay, now I'm going to use my torque wrench, a couple extensions, and we're going to torque these to, the book says 55 foot-pounds plus or minus 5. So I've got my wrench set to 55 pounds. Okay, now I'm going to go diagonally opposite of that top left one and do the bottom right one, then follow that up with the top right one, and then the last one. Now for this bottom one we'll use a universal joint. Not always the best way to torque something, but when it's give or take 5 pounds, it'll be alright. Okay, so you can see here is my linkage, and this actually has the nice adjustable linkage. And actually, a quick note here, most of the linkage for these vehicles or for these transmissions is adjustable. Muncie 4-speed with the Hirsch shifter. This linkage is nice because the adjustments are down near the shifter, which makes it a whole lot easier to put together. And what I want to do, here's my shifter, the bottom of it, and there's bushings. I'm going to use a little socket and a hammer. I'm just going to tap these bushings out and replace them. Okay, what I just said there was a great idea, and then I actually tried it. I didn't film it, but what I ended up doing for those bushings, they are aluminum, or they're probably, yeah, I think they're aluminum, but I basically took a chisel, or you can take a punch, and just broke the bushings, broke them into little pieces, and then they came out much easier. Okay, so I've gotten all the bushings out of my shifter. I'm just going to kind of guide it up through the boot. Okay, turn it sideways. Up in there kind of sideways. Okay. Get it in place. And the bolt up here. Okay, here's the proper fastener for the back side of the shifter. You just kind of slide it into place, push the bolt in, and then try and get the bolt started here. Try it with the other hand here. Okay, and the top bolt you want to kind of tighten up a little bit, still so you can move the shifter, but you'll see I leave it a little bit too loose. Okay, I'll put this bolt in. Okay, now I'm just going to kind of tighten up this bottom one a little bit. Here's my lead for my backup lamp. This is my speedometer cable here over here. I'm just going to put it around this a little bit and reach up here. Connect it. And while I'm doing this, just one note, my backup switch was already connected on this transmission, but if you haven't connected it, you need to just make sure you connect that little rod that goes from your shifter to your backup switch. We're going to reuse the training mount from the other transmission. One, because it still looks good. Two, because this car is actually going to get restored pretty soon. We're just doing this as kind of a temporary fix. Okay, and I'll fast forward here as I put that in, tighten them preliminarily, and then you want to torque them to 40 to 45 foot-pounds. Okay, now to adjust the shifter, take an Allen wrench of the appropriate size. Not sure what size this is. Probably could be a little bigger. There's a hole that runs right through these arms. Okay, so that makes sure that these arms are at the center point. Okay, and you just want to make sure that the Allen wrench goes all the way through to there. If you want, you can reinstall your shift knob right now. Okay, and you've got that Allen wrench in there, so you can actually kind of put your shifter wherever you like it. And you might want to have somebody hold it in place. Or tighten it up a little more, which is what I'm realizing I should have done right now. That's going to be your neutral position. So if you like your shifter a little further forward, you can put it a little further forward. A little further back, you can put it a little further back. I generally like mine right in the middle. Okay, so I'm ready to tighten up my shifter. And one thing to take into account is that the tail shaft is dropped down a little bit. So I'm going to push it back just a little to make up for that. Okay, so I'm going to speed it up from here on out. Tighten up your shifter. And then you're going to want to reconnect all your linkage. And I do have a video specifically on adjusting the linkage correctly. But basically you just want to twist the adjustments until the linkage goes right into the shifter at the right point. And then put all your retaining clips into the linkage. And now lift your transmission back up and slide your cross member in, being very careful to make sure that that hook stays on the emergency brake cable. And once you get your cross member into place, I would recommend starting all the bolts, both the bolts that go into the transmission mount and then the bolts that hold the side of the cross member. Start them all, get them kind of snug tight, and then the bolts that hold the cross member in the middle to the transmission mount, tighten those to 40 to 45 foot-pounds, and then the bolts for the side of the cross member, where the cross member mounts to the frame, those are 35 to 40 foot-pounds. Okay, now we can lift up our drive shaft and install it into the back of the transmission, and then lift it into the axle. Okay, and now back here, get it into place. You need to make sure that you push it into place properly. You should be able to get it all the way back into the axle yoke, and then put the ring yokes back on. Okay, when you tighten these up, they call for 20 to 25 foot-pounds. So with a good size half-inch wrench, you want to pull them tight with the small wrench. Okay, now here, remove your plug for the transmission. I hook a little tube to the gear oil container, and that lets me lift the gear oil container right up. And then once you see some oil flowing down, you put your plug back in, and once that's done, tighten that plug up, and you should be all ready to go. We hope this helps you out. Brought to you by www.oneauto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. Please feel free to call us toll-free 888-844-3393. We're the company that's here for you on the internet and in person.